Welcome to the stream. I'm Malika Bilal. Georgia's government is under pressure amid mass protests for snap elections. But the country's leaders are digging in. So what happens next? Send us your thoughts through Twitter and YouTube, and you could be part of today's show. All against one. That's the chant voiced by thousands of people who joined anti-government protests that convulsed Georgia's capital this week. They say they will continue to speak out against politicians from the ruling Georgian Dream Party, who backtracked on an electoral reform pledge. Al Jazeera's Robin Forrester Walker covered one tense demonstration on Monday. Have a look.
The police have responded very quickly. It's been less than 24 hours since the blockade started around the parliament. Now they're simply moving down the street, clearing people away. Some of them have been actually sitting down in the hope that that would slow the advance.
But it didn't take long to remove the makeshift camp. Last week, government lawmakers rejected a bill on fully proportional voting. It would have made it easier for opposition parties to win more seats in elections next year. So protesters declared Parliament out of bounds. They accused the governing party's chairman, Bidzina Ivanishvili, of breaking his promise to reform Georgia's electoral code.
Well, for more on this, we're joined from Tbilisi by Dekanoidzé. She's a senior member of the opposition National Movement Party. Abashidze is a Georgian political analyst. He's also in Tbilisi. And Tamila Varshalomidze is an Al Jazeera journalist who covers post-Soviet states, including Georgia. She joins us from Doha. Welcome, everyone. Now, we asked for a government representative to join our panel today, but they replied that they are unable to join. So we're going to get started anyway. I want to start here on my laptop with a picture. This from Olesia, who tweets, "Third day of ongoing Tbilisi protests. Parliament and other governmental buildings resumed work. Visible increase of police in downtown, some protest leaders in the courts trying to get back to the streets. Dozens come to the main protest spot every day." And you can see the picture there provided by Civil Georgia. Khatia, dramatic scenes over the past few days. What triggered these protests? Because I know you were there among them just yesterday.
Oh, hello. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving the opportunity to really express the concern of the protesters and the big piece of Georgian population. Actually, the essence of the protest is very much connected to billionaire pro-Russian oligarch Bidzina Ivanishvili, who swept away the power in 2012 in Georgia. But now he's an informal ruler of Georgia. He captured the state because, law enforcement, legislation, and judiciary system and the parliament is under Bidzina Ivanishvili. But, he doesn't have any formal appointment in the government. But I have to say that the anatomy of this protest, a huge protest, began on 20th of June, and this day is called in Georgian new history as a Gavrilov's night. When communist Gavrilov, the member of Russian Duma, he arrived in Georgia and he occupied the seat of the Speaker of the Parliament in Georgia. And I have to say that the Georgian Parliament building is a symbol of Georgian independence. And one day on 20th of June, Georgians woke up and we saw and we heard Gavrilov speaking in Russian at the parliament. So a lot of Georgians started protesting, and then, anti-occupation massive protests began. But then the Minister of Interior, Gakharia, who used to be the citizen of Russian Federation, him and his police brutally dispersed the protest. After that, actually, the protesters, and there are a lot of young civil activists among the protesters, not only the opposition parties, but also a lot of young, bright, young women and men. And actually, they had been demanding the resignation of Gakharia, but in contrary, oligarch pro-Russian Bidzina Ivanishvili, he promoted Gakharia as a prime minister. But after that, because of this huge protest from the streets, Bidzina Bidzina Ivanishvili promised Georgian citizens that he would force Georgian parliament, the majority in the parliament, to vote for the constitutional amendments which would bring the new democracy in Georgia. It is the proportional representation electoral system in Georgia, because now in Georgia we have the mixed system. I mean, the proportional list and the majoritarian. So
Katya, you have given us a wide and in-depth look at why people are out on the streets, and clearly we can see it's several things, and it stems from protests in the summer. But one of the things stuck out to us, and that's a name that keeps coming up again and again. And so I wanted to pause you there so our audience is all on the same page here. Take a look at the picture of the person that you mentioned, Bidzina Ivanishvili, Georgia's richest man. This from the New York Times. This is their caption on that picture. He's at his offices overlooking the capital, Tbilisi. This is in 2012. This picture was taken. His blessing is essential for major building initiatives like the port project. This is the country's richest man, Georgia's richest man.
Can I jump in?
I actually want to give this one to Tamila because we haven't heard her voice yet. Tamila, talk to us about what we should know about Ivanishvili and why that matters for the protests today.
First of all, I want to give context. In 2012, we changed from presidential system, election system to, government system to parliamentary, so that we would not have one man ruling the whole country, with whole power that should be distributed between institutions. And then we came to have this man from running the country from the shadows. He came with promises that he would use his wealth to promote development in Georgia, and that he convinced people that he was so rich that he would only take care of the interests of the people. But years went by, and we see that he's consolidating his power, and he is concentrating on making the Georgia more and more dependent on one person rule. And it is a little bit scary for Georgian people, because it's impossible to tell what would take it to change the government and change the person from the power that he doesn't even have an official post for. He is also seen as somebody who cannot relate to Georgian people, because he is so rich and so isolated within his small circle that he is not in touch with his own population. So it is important to point out that he stepped aside after the elections in 2012, and he said, let Georgia have a government that is not based on my personality. But then after several years, when he saw his group lose the image, he came back and became the official face of his Georgian Dream Party, which it's a little bit confusing, because if he can just step in and out of the spotlight, it's a little bit confusing who is running the country.
So Gia, go ahead.
Yeah, well, maybe I will kind of say my word and kind of saying from the government position, what the position of the government is. His official title of Ivanishvili is a chairman of the ruling party, like Kaczynski in Poland, And also, yes, these protests are quite frank and quite kind of touching all circles of society, but let's divide the protests. Is kind of the freedom of expression is fine in every country, but let's imagine that on Westminster Palace somebody puts padlocks, chains, and does the Metropolitan Police will stand, or will they do the same, like pushing the demonstrators out from the field? And then they were allowed to stand in the parliament and expressing their views. But after this Monday kind of peak of protests, it's going down and down, and we see now that, yes, there is a disappointment in the West as well, and we see from the United States Congress, from Council of Europe, from members of the European Parliament, various groups are kind of expressing concerns and asking parties to sit at the table. But the ruling party
That's
has the
not true,
arguments
though.
because
That's
they
not
want
true.
that once the destructive
not
opposition,
true.
what they call the UNM, stops this blockade of parliament and any administrative buildings, which is prohibited by the law in any democratic country, they will continue talking.
Right.
So this
Can
is
I
kind
jump
of
in,
some kind
Malik?
of a deadlock now, and we hope that with the help of our Western partners, we can solve this situation. And by the way, the
So
Russian
Gia, I hear your, I do hear your point. I want to bring in our community. I hear the point you're making, and I want to bring in this off of the back of that.
While he was
Can I jump in?
Gia, I can hear your point, I do, and I hear the passion and the frustration on your part, but I want to bring this in on Twitter. This is Olesya again, and she says, but why a need for this dispersal altogether? This was only the second day of people in the streets. Yes, they were doing some nasty things, including blocking the office of the ruling party, which you mentioned. But if in politics, one has to practice higher endurance level. No? So, Khatia, I know you wanted to come in there, and in addition to that, I'll say that there were protesters from an earlier protest who were detained. And you recently were at the courthouse where that trial is ongoing. Talk to us about what you think of this tweet and of what Gia was saying.
Absolutely. So when Mr. Abashidze is talking about the Western, just countries just talking about their concerns, yeah, they're very much concerned because Bedina Ivanishvili promised Georgian citizens to bring in Georgia some electoral changes, very, very important electoral changes, which would change a country from the political state, what we call state capture, to the democratic society. So that's why they are very much concerned, and we talk to our friends, every day. So this is first. And second, I want to tell you that the Ivanishvili is kind of a billionaire oligarch who earned a lot of money in Russia, and he's kind of, I want to be Putin. Actually, this is a title he's called by the Western press, not by me only. So that's why, he uses the methodology and the methods what Putin uses in Russia. Actually, yes, I have been at the court, 2 days, because 37 of the protesters had been detained. And you know how police detained them? They just kidnapped them from the different streets and from the protests. And one of my friends and one of the shareholder of the main opposition channel, Tavari, and one of very active civil activists, actually, and the supporter of opposition parties, Georgi Ruro, was detained, 2 days ago. And actually, I had been attending the trial in the court, and he was detained according to the Criminal Procedure Code with the charge of illegal carrying the illegal guns. So but what I heard at the court, I have to tell you that this is a political prosecution. So Bidzina tries to really copy Putin. So, and that's first, and
right.
then the final point, what I want to really make. So,
make it very brief because our other two guests are dying to get in.
Sure. Yeah. Georgian citizens are humiliated because Bidzinas have stole free and fair elections. What we're fighting for, Malik, is our freedom and for free and fair elections.
Right.
And that's
so
why
I hear that point. I actually want to take that point and move on a little bit. Tamila, I see you trying to get in, and I want to pick up on the point that Khatia just made with this. This is from Georgie, and Khatia said Georgian citizens are humiliated. She was going in one direction with that, but others online are going in a different direction. They're agreeing, but this is why. Georgie says it's hard to recall when the last time was when Georgia had a peaceful day. Literally every day is full of drama and crisis. Georgian dream government needs to go. This is the end. And I want to play someone else who also feels similarly, and they explain why it is they feel this way, and it's beyond just the electoral reform they think is necessary. This is Tamaz, and here's what he told the stream.
20% of Georgia is occupied by Russia. there is a huge problem of general poverty and unemployment. And one of the biggest challenges is human rights protection, especially when it comes to the rights of LGBTQI community. There has been organized lots of demonstrations, but this is the first demonstration which managed to mobilize thousands of people with extremely different values, as the majority of Georgian society agrees on Georgia's European reintegration.
So we apologize for the audio quality on that. The room he was in was a little bit echoey, but I think you could hear his point. What do you make of that, Tamila?
First of all, maybe we should explain why people are in the streets. At the moment, it seems as if it's for ousting the government, through a revolution, to bring the national movement back into power. But the first concern was about the election reform, right? And this reform is supposed to happen in 2024. So the Constitution already has a clause that says that the fully proportional election reform is going to come into effect in 2024. So it's not clear why the opposition is pushing for making 2020 elections in this format. When actually national movement was in power, the opposition was demanding the same thing, and they didn't let the opposition voice be heard. They didn't enact this election reform when they were in power. Now that they're in the opposition, and they need this rule to change so that they come into a better position in parliament. Now they're being impatient about it, and they want the election to be held according to this reform in 2020. But the public of Georgia is confused. How are they going to benefit from these changes that the opposition is demanding? It will make politicians that they don't even know go into parliament through party lists. Isn't it better? They're asking to vote for the person who is actually representing their community, and they are actually, that person would actually know what the problem of the community is and go into parliament to defend their rights. But right now, opposition wants to put as many people as possible into parliament, so that more parties are in parliament, not just 2 or 3. And then there will be even more fractured parliament in the country, and there will be even more fights between the politicians, and there will be no achievements made. Right now, it's all about fist fights and the water bottle throwing.
So, Tamila, I hear your point. Gia wants to get in, but Gia, before you do, I want to bring this in on YouTube from someone watching live. Rain says, democracy in Georgia? I've lost my trust in democracy. Today, it is simply elected dictatorship. So that's a view of just one person there. But
it's a very radical view. Yeah,
clearly it is. But what is your take? How would you respond to him and respond to what Tamila was saying of the electorate?
The current system which we will have in 2020 October is a mixed system. As it was mentioned, it's a quite legal system, unlike opposition, what says it's illegal and captured. And by the way, the captured court, which was Madam Dekanoidzé talking about, that captured court released within 10 days, her son 2 years ago for drug-related crime, which is very harshly punishable in this country, and it raised concerns among many people. So why some are serving lengthy sentences for drug-related crimes, and her son spent only 10 days in the court. So that's a very tiny thing to comment, but also to mention that after this blockading and the protests, which were absolutely illegal, we must separate the freedom of expression in legal forms and illegal forms. And after these illegal forms, many people, many supporters just left this theater, this scene, and we do not see the people enough to blockade the streets and to fill in the streets and main avenue of Tbilisi. And that's a problem for the opposition. They are self-destructing themselves with these illegal actions, because citizens who are very rightfully, I repeat, are protesting against this kind of disappointment, they have the freedom of expression, and they should not kind of burst into administrative buildings or parliaments, and should not chain the parliament. You cannot chain the gates of the Congress or Westminster Palace or any other parliament. it's absolutely illegal. So, and also talking about Georgian dreams, I see the mistake there that they did not say clearly to the public internationally also that there were a group of so-called majoritarian MPs, these pluralitarian system MPs, who were against it. And also the group of that majoritarian MPs who are firstly supporting this, and then they did not get benefit.
Malik, you have to give me
that they will be on the list.
You have to give me like the 5
they protested and they blocked this.
Gia and Khatia, I hear your point. One moment, because Gia said something was interesting. I had to write it down. He said that the opposition is self-destructing, and so I want to bring in the take from people who think a little bit differently. So this first is a tweet from Georgie, who says, according to the latest research, IRI Global, if elections were taking place tomorrow, Georgian Dream, which is the ruling party, would get 23% of the votes, and the opposition parties would sum about 41%. This explains a lot based on Georgie. This is what he writes about the recent moves of the Georgian Dream government. And I want to hear the voices of a few people in that opposition, some pretty prominent protesters who joined the protests in the Georgian capital on Sunday night. Have a look.
I would say that this is one of the most important moments in our history when we stand for freedom, we stand for our right to vote, and we stand for the point that we are not the ones that can be neglected in our choice.
We decided to block parliament entrances and not to let anybody to enter the parliament. This is our peaceful, non-violent demonstration against this regime. We are sure no government, no regime can win against the people. People will be victorious.
So, Khatia, that, of course, for our audience, was the former president of Georgia and also a member of your opposition party, the National Movement Party. How unified is the opposition, to Gia's point? How united is it?
First of all, actually, I would not comment Mr. Abashidze's ugly comment about my family and my son, which is not absolutely true, though. But, you know, this is, I mean, pro-Russian Georgian Dream and his supporter, political analysts, you know, always comment like that. So, actually, that's okay. Secondly, actually, Mr. Tabagari, wait a minute, please. Mr. Tabagari actually is absolutely right. According to International Republican Institute, 41% is really the number, I mean, of the united opposition. And actually, especially the
any midterm elections, you are losing.
I really want you to be quiet, Mr. Abashidze.
So, Gia, I take your criticism of what she's saying, but let's let her complete her sentence at least. Khatia, go ahead.
You know, the 23% is like the Georgian Dream. So I have to say that this is a, you know, I mean, it's a path to nowhere for Georgian Dream. That's why Bidzina Ivanishvili, who really wants to be like Putin, that's why it's his route. You know, he wants to be in the power forever. But Georgians are not like that, actually. Georgians really want to have democracy, fair and free elections. That's why we're protesting. And I want to talk about our demands. So, a request. So first is like the preliminary election. It was a proportional representation electoral system. The second is like the resignation of the government, and we're not going to let Ivanishvili, that Mr. Gaharia, who is a prime minister, ex-Russian citizen, to really hold the government and elections in Georgia. And third is like the re-administration of the Central Election Committee and the chair of the Central Electoral Committee, and you know, administration is under Ivanishvili too. So actually that's our you know, just the main request. So three and very I have to say very respectful for Georgia, from Georgian citizens, and this is what we want for our future. For the future of democracy. And
Khatia, that is a great place to pause this conversation. What you want for the future of your democracy. I want to end the conversation because unfortunately we are out of time, but I want to end here with a tweet from Olesya, who's looking forward to the future and says, what happens now? I can't see protests vanish away. No one would want to see these street protests turn into anything more violent. it may take time for life to return, so we will see. Our thanks, of course, to Khatia, to Gia, and to Tamila for joining us and to our community on Twitter and YouTube. We will see you next time.